Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Port City Council Finance meeting. It is March 27th. It is 5:34. Please stand and join me in the pledge. Councilmember Keel.
Present.
Mr. Bergman.
Here.
Councilmember McLaren. Present. Councilmember Vera.
Present.
Councilmember Soriento. Here. Member. Oh, Casey.
Present.
All present. Thank you. At this point in time, our agenda includes just one item. It's ordinance 11, ordinance transferring funds within the 2023 general fund. Council President Keel has requested the administration. Is there anyone from the public who is interested in speaking on this item tonight? Seeing none, we will move right into our presentation by the administration, I think. I would first take a motion on ordinance 11. Motion. Councilmember Soriento, and a second.
Second.
Councilmember Brosnan. Under discussion, I would open it up to the mayor. Would you please tell us why are we here today?
Here, because it's not that nice out, I just figured it'd be a great night to hang together. So with me are Deputy Mayor Seamus Donnelly, our Comptroller Dylan Spring, and our Corp Counsel Dana Salazar, who are here for any questions that you might have. I thought I'd open up. I want to thank the council for meeting at this special meeting this evening and finance meeting. After taking office, second week in, the property owner here, First Columbia, approached us and essentially asked for their $220,000 of back rent. Long story short, in October of 2022, to give you a little background, the lease expired. And upon that expiration, each month, the rent for our floor here, City Floor, City Hall, did escalate a certain amount of dollars each month. We did send you the backup that you were looking for, also lease agreement, which outlines that. Fast forward, you know, nobody's here to point fingers. Nobody's here to say, okay, who knew what, when. The fact of the matter is that upon taking office, $226,000 was due of the escalated rent. So if you go through the information that I believe Seamus sent you, you'll see how it's outlined. In addition to the rent, we also pay property taxes, utilities, which you'll also see in that backup. So the 226, what we're requesting tonight is to pay off the $226,000 from October of 2022 through December 31st of 2023. We did find monies that were in the 2023 budget that were unused that can go towards this $226,000 that is due. Stating that these are unspent money, in January, February, March, we will pay those monies for 2024 monies. Why are we asking you to meet quickly? Dylan is working with the auditors who will be starting next week to audit our 2023 books. So to close the 2023 books, that happens by Friday of this week. Hence, special meeting finance tonight to take care of that. So the auditor will come in and will obviously report back to you of the 2023, the numbers, audit, etc. Additionally, our corporation council is negotiating with the property owner, First Columbia, which will obviously, by paying off the $226,000, put us in a better position, leveraging our position in negotiations. We do not support long-term lease of 10, 15, 20 years here on the fifth floor of the Headley building. Hence, while our corporation council is negotiating for a short-term lease, which we won't get into the weeds on that, obviously, because it's still being negotiated. But saying that the property owner is looking for their back rent as part of those negotiations, it will allow us to hopefully negotiate maybe a 3 or 5 year lease. In the next 2 weeks, hopefully sooner, we're on maybe our 15th, 16th draft for our RFP to look at other locations, whether it be to rent, another space, whether it be to rehab a building that is being underutilized. We don't intend to look to build a new city hall, recognizing you're talking, a good $20–25 million. We're looking for potentially a public-private partnership. We're looking potentially to rehab a building. So what you will see in the RFP is a number of locations that we have identified over the years that the City Hall Committee from back in 2017, 2018, while I was council president, a bunch of volunteers got together and they looked at various locations, for instance, ICC, couple other locations. And so that will be in the RFP to look at those locations. And it will also ask any developer out there, any property owner who maybe has 30,000 square feet and above to come and offer us a potential location. So on 2 fronts, it'll look at various locations and at the same time, it'll offer that flexibility for a developer or a property owner to come to us and offer us a proposal. And so saying that, additionally, with public-private partnerships, and we will look at this space in addition. Obviously, this will also be part of the RFP when we're looking at rentals, et cetera. The 5th floor here at the Headley building will be looked at. There was some talk about investing here on the 5th floor, appropriating monies to make this more of a city hall. We, the administration, myself, I don't support that. We lease the space. I don't support putting $1 million into space that will be leasing. So ideally, we're looking to hopefully own the building. And, the whole idea here is to give the people of Troy, which I've heard countlessly throughout not just my tenure, but before my tenure as a local official, a city hall that we can be proud of. So the idea is to look obviously at this floor, other locations, and we appreciate the $226,000 this evening being acted on because it will close out that debt. And at the same time, it will allow us to negotiate and put us in a position for better negotiation. So once again, thank you to the council. Thank you to the majority for supporting that. Thank you, Council President, for sponsoring it. And I do know that the Deputy Mayor and certainly Dylan and Dina are here for any additional questions, but the Deputy Mayor wanted to ask something.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. I did just want to hand out, because I know that there was a little, just to give a little clarity of kind of the timeline and what the process was prior to our administration, with the rent. So it's just a communication and an invoice showing that the higher amount, including the holdover, the practice was that it was just crossed out and the lower amount was paid. And it kind of sounds like that was going on from October of 2022 until we all got here. So I did just want to lay that out. I know there was some requests from the council on some reports. So I did just want to hand that out to everybody quick.
Well, Seamus is circulating that. I did want to state, Dylan, as mentioned, and Council President, you might remember Councilmember Soriento too. During the budget hearings back in October, we did ask the prior comptroller about this year's rent, knowing that the rent was escalated if it was budgeted for, and it is budgeted for in 2024.
Just as for the public, that they can't see what I handed you. So that's just a communication from the prior deputy mayor, instructing one of the clerks that does ultimately process the payment, for the rent to go ahead and not pay the higher amount. And then it sounds like it just was not addressed from that over 2022.
Dana, did you want to add to that?
I'm not sure if this was gonna be one of your questions, but I think someone asked the question, whether there had been some discussion of waiving this escalated rent. There was a brief discussion, it looks like in the beginning of 2023 in January, that there might be a waiver of the escalation rent from 2022 if the city had signed a lease by the end of February of 2023. Other than that one communication, I saw no other reference to waiving or incorporating that rent. And honestly, I don't know if that meant that that rent would be rolled over into the new lease or not.
Well, having been here, I can assure you that we not only had one meeting, the mayor and I were present with First Columbia, the then mayor and the deputy mayor, and they made it very clear that as long as negotiations were underway, that fee would be waived and it would be permanently discontinued if we went for a 10 to 15-year lease. So that was always the understanding. This is a new twist, and so and I've been in discussions with First Columbia, so they confirm it. And if you want, just go to April 20th, 2023, and it's very clearly stated there in that meeting. So
I mean,
I will open it up.
I mean, I can address that one. When Seamus and I met with them on February 2nd, I asked that very question because that's what I had been told, that there had been discussions of waiving. And First Columbia told me that other than that one January 3rd, 2023 letter where they articulated the waiver, that there had been no other written agreement or proposal between anyone, and that other than the 15-year lease that they had proposed, there was no other proposal.
Well, I was in conversation with them today. They reiterated that it was always a part of the negotiations, 10 years, 15 years, but it may not have been in writing, but it was part of the understanding. And well, it was, and I was not the only person in the room. So I don't want to get into a he said, she said thing as the mayor suggested. What I would like to do at this point in time is allow any council members who might have questions to please address the chair.
Council President, I would ask the Corporation Council on this discussion. They're not bound by my understanding. That's why I'm asking you. If you have a lease, you have a written lease.
Right.
They could say in the room 5 times, we're going to waive it, but I don't believe you can have a written contract and an oral contract. You can't say we have a written lease, but orally we amended it. It has to be in writing. So I don't believe we have any legal stance on that to say like, well, they said we didn't have to pay it.
Well, according to the anecdote, the promise was that would waive it if we entered into a 10 or 15-year lease. the proposal I saw from last year was a 15-year lease with $600,000 upfront for renovations and another $600,000 built into the rent going forward, with some other material changes. So my understanding is that the waiver was in exchange for this 15-year lease, which, as the mayor's already explained, the change in administration was not as much on the table. So whether they were willing to waive it or not, in my discussions with them from the beginning of my term here at the beginning of the year, they have strongly, I don't want to say demanded, but they've strongly asked for their rent every time I've met with them. And every time I meet with them, they present me with an updated invoice for the holdover rent and ask me when they're gonna get paid. So if they're saying today that they were willing to waive it, they have never communicated that from January 1st of 2024 on. In fact, it's been exactly the opposite, with a demand for their rent every time we meet.
Council President.
Councilmember President.
So, to be clear, the amendment that would have been executed did not get executed. So even by the piece of paper in front of me, they're not willing to waive that. And are we willing to do a 10-year contract, or is that too long-term? Because it seems like that's $400,000 a year minimum with $1.2 million worked into it. So the taxpayer's gonna pay $4 million plus 1.2, so $5.2 million to rent the space
So
that we don't own and have to maintain.
I apologize. As the mayor said, this floor is not out of the question. It is possible that during the term of the short-term lease, we decide to enter into a long-term lease on this floor with this landlord. But in order to evaluate whether that 10-year lease on this location is in place, we need a short-term solution in the meantime. Because staying in holdover status subjects us to the holdover rent while we negotiate. So rather than put ourselves in a position of deciding today on a 15-year lease where we are, a short-term lease with this landlord gives us breathing room of at least 3 years to figure out what the long-term solution is.
So my understanding of that is if we take the short-term deal and pay this money, it would still be cheaper to the taxpayer than the 10 to 15-year deal.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Barrow.
Where are we at with negotiations with First Columbia? Are they willing to negotiate this holdover? I mean, the purpose of a holdover fee is to get a tenant to act and to either move out of the space or sign a lease. We're still here 18 months after the holdover has been in place. I guess where are negotiations at with First Columbia, and how much longer does the administration intend to stay in the space? Assuming the plans for a new city hall go, fantastically. How much longer are we gonna be here?
So Seamus and I met with the landlord, I think 32 days after we took office, and started negotiations to put something in place that would take us out of holdover status. Right now, they've presented a short-term lease to me. I've responded with proposed changes, and I'm waiting for them to get back to me. How many times we're gonna go back and forth is a little bit up in the air. But I believe that we're not far apart in the terms. I don't want to speak too much about the specifics because I don't want to put First Columbia or the mayor's office or the city in a position of carrying out the details without context. I expect that we'll have something in place effective, I would say within the next month, 6 weeks, perhaps, something to present to you.
But those negotiations don't involve these holdover charges.
They do, in that we would pay them upon execution of the short-term lease.
Do we have that in writing?
That was in their first proposal,
They demanded the holdover fees
correct,
before they would enter into a short-term,
as part of the short-term.
right, but not, were we looking at a long-term lease? That
They
is not,
They
that's
have
not,
never presented that to me.
that's not right.
If I may, Council President, just since we're going back with the past too, it doesn't sound like ever a long-term lease was tenable. It never didn't ever seem like it was gonna be reasonable or accepted by the folks involved at various times. That's why it didn't get done. So I think that, you know, talking about like there was this 20-year option that was so favorable and didn't happen is unrealistic. I just want to make.
Well, and I'd like to clarify that because that's absolutely not correct.
It's
It didn't happen because it never, the lease agreement never got finalized, but not untenable. We had 4 votes ready for a 10-year lease. So do not tell me
Where did they go? Where did folks go?
the votes, lost, they left, their term ended and there was no lease agreement.
So it didn't
It didn't happen because it never, no, you can't say it was untenable. It was not done. The lease did not get produced so that we could act on it.
Well, I just want to also be clear on, I think there's a distinction between lease negotiations and whether or not that money would have been paid and accounting for the holdover rent. Everybody knew or should have known that in October of 2022, without an extension in place prior to October of 2022, I'm not even talking about October of last year, but 16 months ago, the rent was going to escalate. That wasn't budgeted for in 2022, and it was not budgeted for in 2023, which is why we're talking about moving funds around in this finance meeting. So regardless of whether or not there was discussion of waiver, the accounting was never done to set aside sufficient funds under the contract.
Because the 10-year lease was still on the table. So, you know,
Council-
we can go round and round on that. But I would rather that we move on to other questions. Councilmember Casey.
I just want to say, I've talked before, I had a long history of being a rental property manager, owning rental property, city marshal. I've dealt with a lot of people have often, they ask me, I don't want to pay rent. I don't think I should have to pay rent. Or in this situation, you haven't come to terms. And we said, well, if you're going to appear for the judge, you should make sure that all of it, that money you withheld is in an escrow account. And that's because if you appear for the judge and you spent the money, you've lost moral ground. In this situation, if due diligence was done, the money, because there was a chance the money should have been paid, it should have been reflected in last year's budget. We shouldn't be transferring. There should be an item for the rent or put in escrow. Thank God we had the money, because I know in budget negotiations, when we sat in before we even took office, they were talking about legislative pay raises, and it was like, they had to look in, he had to look at the numbers, oh, it exceeded the cap, very tight. Thank God we have the money. But this money should have been accounted for, because there was a chance we could have had to pay this money. But it was never, and we have talked about who knew what and everything. I have to say, if everybody knew that this rent wasn't being paid, I can't believe that nobody on the council at budget time wouldn't have made the point, what about the $15,000 a month we're not paying? Where is that in the budget? And Council President Sue, you've always done your due diligence. When there's money being moved around or transferred, you've asked for documents all the time. You've done a great job asking questions, administration. And I seem to think that if you knew that 15,000 wasn't being unpaid, that you would have been all over that too in the budget. But like I said, it wasn't in the budget. It should have been put aside. If we didn't have to pay it, that's great. But luckily, in this case, we found the money. Because I can't even think about it if we didn't have the money. Because at the beginning of the year, we were talking about not having money for legislative pay raises that never happened and things like that. We're at the cap. Or we want to give council people insurance. Oh, the cap. So if we didn't have this money, we'd be in dire straits right now, where we wouldn't be in a very good position for bargaining for our short-term lease.
If it had been in place, the expectation was the long-term lease would have been in place, then there should have been budgeted $600,000 for the initial renovation, as well as the increase or the proposed long-term rent, which was not $30,000 a month. It was significantly higher than that. So it appears to me that it just got missed. That they just carried over the same rent without looking at the existing lease to see whether the holdover rent was going to kick in by October of 2022, I imagine your 2023 budget was already done, and it just fell through the cracks. And now, at this point, we're just trying to resolve the financial accounting so that this rent can be.
Councilmember Casey, not only did I know, but so did the mayor. We knew that that money was not being paid. We understood it was because the fee was waived. So that is,
Council President.
I would like, I like the mayor to, I'd like the mayor to acknowledge that we sat in a meeting at the Cluett Room downstairs, and we had a public meeting, it was a finance meeting here on April 20th.
Council President, you're mixing apples and oranges.
No,
When coming into office, did I know that 226K
Yes.
was not paid? No. When coming into office, the Council President, you also, think about it. The second weekend, I had no idea. I don't pay the bills as Council President. When we came in to find out from the payroll clerk that the rent was actually being crossed out to the old rent and not paying the rent that we were supposed to be paying? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And when the landlord approached me that second week and said, we want our 226, I immediately turned, first of all, we didn't have a comptroller then. So I turned to Gabrielle, our treasurer. We dug around and figured out that was never paid. So when you're mixing those apples and oranges, that is unequivocally not true.
it's the same money. And
We
I
can,
suggest you revisit the YouTube video.
the April of
April
2023.
Right, because
Fast forward,
it
that
was
does
very,
not mean, but
made
Council
clear.
President, that does not mean in December, you don't pay that bill. So that's what I'm trying to tell you. Yes, they wanted us to go into a long-term lease. I publicly made it very clear, I do not support a long-term lease. Now I'm in a position to say, okay, we either want to stay here and figure it out in terms of our negotiated short-term lease. So yes, we'll stay here for a short term, put out an RFP, find a good city hall for the people of Troy. But when it comes to the 226, did I know 226K was due? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And that was never discussed.
Council President, I have to also agree with the mayor. I didn't know that.
You weren't in the meeting.
Okay.
The April meeting, you were.
I was in the April meeting, but
Where it was discussed.
but I would have no way of knowing that rent was not being paid or the holdover was not being paid. I just have to make it clear. I mean, you know, do you know what their national grid bill is? No, or do you know if they pay, do you know if they pay their national grid bill?
You do now.
You do now, but who would have thought to ask this? Who would have thought to even ask this? I mean, if I'm gonna, if I wanna negotiate my spectrum bill, do I not pay for what is owed for now until I negotiate something? I mean, no, you, even if you don't have a final written agreement, you should be paying for what you owe until you have something in writing that says otherwise.
And we were doing that. We were paying the rent.
You were doing that, but did it happen?
Council,
Yes, it did.
wait a minute, Council
we
President,
paid
the
the
rent
rent.
was not being paid to the rent that was supposed to be paid under the agreement. That was not clear by the property owner when this, you saw it, it's being crossed out to pay the old rent. They had.
That's the holdover, that's the holdover.
Council President,
Yes.
the document that was handed out, it's an email from First Columbia stating to do exactly that. To cross out and write in the old rent amount. And at the April 2023 meeting, April 20th, 2023, First Columbia representatives stated that the holdover would be waived should the city enter into a lease agreement and negotiate the holdover.
Council President.
Now, whether it ends up being a long-term lease or not, it sounds like it's gonna be a short-term lease is preferred at this point. My question is there any movement on these fees? Is there any way to negotiate these fees?
So if, a council member, one, to answer your direct question, no. And two, just to go back to the timeline, because it seems like we have a little muddying of memories here. Is that, again, you can talk about, a bunch of us can have a conversation in a room and say whatever we want, that doesn't matter. But the reality of it is, the only time on paper here, okay, barring the other example that Dana gave in February of 2023, in October 27th of 2022, just like you referenced, Councilmember Vera, that's the last time that it has been seen that there's been a conversation between First Columbia on paper. This is real. This is a he said, she said, like the council president is playing. What this is talking about on paper here. And then the deputy mayor is saying, yes, go ahead and cross it out and do the lower amount. Now, maybe at that time, they were in conversations of doing a, 40-year lease and crossing things out and doing all that. That's fine. But the matter of the fact is, in writing, barring any secret conversation the council president had with the owner of this building, is that in writing, this was the only time it was talked about crossing that out and paying that. There was then memo that Dana referenced in February of 2023 that we entertained again, hey, we'll waive all those fees if you sign the lease. Never do I see any correspondence from First Columbia in writing saying, this is your new rent. Keep doing your rent. Keep doing this. Never has it been articulated anywhere.
Right,
in
and the
writing.
lease agreement was not executed.
Never
But
was it
back in
articulated.
April 23,
If I may, I'm answering your question, if you wouldn't mind letting me finish. So never has it been articulated in writing that the $30,241.05 outside of October 27th, 2022 email. That's the only time. Because the real discussion here is, have we known that there was this buildup of all this rent? Has it been acceptable to not pay the rent? And again, barring private, secret conversations the council president had, there is nowhere in writing stating that. Nowhere.
have you guys paid the holdover January, February, March?
This year.
Yeah,
No. We have not paid 2024 because we're in negotiations for an extension potentially beginning October 1st of 2024.
so it's possible to negotiate the holdover for the last 3 months, but not the last 18.
It's not a matter of negotiation, it's a matter of budgeting. We have enough money in the 2024 budget to pay the holdover rent,
Right,
so we don't.
but
need
we're
to
currently
come
not
to you.
paying it.
We don't need to come to you for funds transfer because the funds are available. They've been essentially escrowed so that we can pay it as soon as we execute this extension.
It sounds like there's a bit of movement here
There's no
Potentially.
movement.
with these fees.
There's no movement. There has never been any movement since January 1st of 2024. They have never not demanded their rent assertively.
I'm still waiting to
Clara.
speak, Council President.
Oh, sorry. Councilmember Brazil.
Perfect, thank you. It clearly says in the email, however, until it is signed / executed, I cannot reverse the holdover rent from our system. If the amendment doesn't get executed, then I believe the holdover rent will be due. That's why I don't want to reverse it yet. So the person who owns the building is saying, you owe me 1.5 rent every month in your month-to-month lease until a new lease is signed. Right,
Right.
there's no new lease signed, and we still owe that 1.5.
We're negotiating.
We're negotiating, sure. However, we owe
Please address the
rent
chair.
1.5 times the rent. We're paying 1, so there's 0.5 holdover, right? Everyone agrees to that? You can't just not pay 0.5 because you're negotiating. I understand they're saying that they're doing that right now. We're gonna have to pay that money too, because we're in the space in a month-to-month lease. The 10-year agreement says we owe 1.5 when we're in this situation. Us arguing over a contract in black and white because there's a negotiation is not gonna help us because we owe $200,000 to somebody. And that's because we signed a contract as a city. We can sit here and argue about that, but we owe $200,000, pay the money. If I didn't pay my rent for 18 months, according to my lease, I would have a piece of paper on my door saying, get out, You don't live here anymore. So I would have to pay that money. That's what we're doing here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember McLaren.
Council President, I just wanted to read the following, the paragraph following what, Councilmember Brosnan said, which says, if you'd like, you can manually adjust October, November invoices, pay the old amount, so that my records will show a balance of a holdover rent. Once the amendment is executed, I will go and reverse the differences in our system and send you a credit.
Council President.
So whether or not there was further conversation or memos, the last memo was sent by First Columbia. So the onus is on them to then say, hey, this isn't working anymore, or we're demanding it, or whatever, but the last writing that, you should have is them saying, cross it off, pay the lower amount, and then once it's amended, or, once the amendment is executed, we'll reverse the charge.
Okay, I just wanted to answer her statement. So the lease expired in October of 2022. There was no extension in place before the expiration. So the invoices started coming in at 1.5 times, October and November. These emails address the invoices that came in for October and November of 2022. We're now in March of 2024. So in between this email, where they were talking about a relatively short period of time, there were discussions of the long-term lease. January 3rd, there was a written communication from the landlord saying that they would consider waiving the holdover rent so long as a lease was signed by February 28th, 2023. Apparently, based on the anecdote, there were further discussions in April of 2023. And now we've had discussions with them in February and March of 2024. From the discussions after January 1st of 2024, the landlord has never offered to waive or reduce the holdover rent, not one.
Thank you. Councilmember Rivera.
Aside from being on the record at the April 20th meeting in 2023, stating they would do just that.
For 2 months.
Well, no, for the rest of the year.
It's at October and November.
No. The April 20th meeting, First Columbia is on the record as stating they would waive these fees should the city enter into a lease agreement. Right? Mayor, I mean.
Was it a
Council President.
You were,
Yeah.
my understanding is that if we signed the 15-year lease, that would have required the 600,000 up front and then build the other 600,000 improvements into the term.
I don't deny we're in the middle of the longest negotiation for a lease.
Well, we
That I've heard of.
started.
But we are in the middle of negotiating a lease, correct?
Yeah.
Can something be provided to the council in writing from First Columbia that states that they are unwilling to negotiate these fees?
I don't know, that would be up to First Columbia. But it doesn't, okay, so if we can close out, what we're trying to do is close out 2023 without carrying over $223,000 worth of liabilities into 2024, because they belong in 2023 and arguably 2022. If during our negotiation, if the landlord is provided with a transcript of this council meeting, and they do find it in their hearts to waive some of it, certainly we can offset future rent with any reduction. The likelihood of that happening, though, based on our current negotiations, it has never been raised as a possibility under the current negotiation for the lease that we're negotiating now.
Correct. Thank you.
Council President, it's also, what, a year and a half later also? I wouldn't say it's negotiating good. I were the landowner and I said, oh, hey, your rent is due. I'll give you a break on the 2 months. Regardless of the council. I don't care. That right now it's just writing. They're gonna give you a break on the 2 months, and then I took another 16 months to sign, whatever it is. I would also say, I'm probably not gonna waive $250,000 that's gonna be a tough negotiation for sure. We're gonna rack up another $250,000 trying to negotiate $230,000 away. Unless we sign a 15-year deal telling the property owners, the people who pay any kind of tax in Troy, that, hey, we're gonna do another, what's that, 4 million plus another 2 million, so that's $6 million, and then another 1.2, so $8.2 million, or, yeah, I may have done my math.
I
wrong. Because I am a little frustrated, in the
Matt,
fact that
there-
we're even talking about owing $250,000 to the city.
So I do want to raise, a point in our discussion. So in this prior lease, and I may be wrong, but I don't believe I am, there were never any escalations of the rent. The rent in 2010 is the same as the rent today that was being paid in 2023. The new proposed 15-year lease and the current lease both provide for escalations on an annual basis. So the landlord has raised with us several times that the rate that reflects the $30,000 rate that is reflected is, according to them, well below market. And they don't believe that it's consistent with what they could get on the open market. So the holdover rent that we're paying them, potentially in their mind, merely equalizes the rent that the city is paying versus what they could get on the open market.
30,000 is
$9.96
Councilmember Barrett.
$30,000 a month on 30,000 square feet.
$9.96 a square foot. He's saying they can
Right,
get $15 to $19 on the open market.
Okay, but at $45,000 a month, we're paying well over that.
Councilman Steele.
Councilmember Casey.
I just have to sum it up for me. It just seems like they would waive it if we signed. We never signed. They might have said whatever, like I said at the beginning, but we have no document from them signing that we both signed, the city administration and the landlord, saying they were waiving, correct?
Correct.
So that was just negotiations, that they might waive, but they didn't. And I just, on the face of it, knowing Carmela, as we all do, I just find it hard to believe that she's just agreeing to pony up $226,000 for no reason at all. That would go against everything we know about. Oh, I'm there now, I'm just gonna, okay, they want 226, let's give it to them. That does not sound like anything that our mayor would do. I've known her since first grade.
I haven't known her that long, but the reality is that we're paying the over $200,000 because we are not willing to go for a long-term lease. And, that is the reality of the situation. So
I disagree with that somewhat, only to the extent that
I'm still speaking. And I have to say, I'm really disappointed, Mayor, in the statement that you put out, in which you failed to acknowledge our meetings, failed to acknowledge the April 20th meeting, which is a matter of public record. I think this is the kind of thing that gives people a bad feeling about government. When we're not being honest and upfront about meetings that we were in and what we heard and knew about. So I just have to say that because I'm disappointed. And
I just, I understand, before we get too far, in terms of negotiating, right now we have a debt of $226,000 and we're negotiating either a short or a long-term lease under either scenario. The landlord it's like the trade-in for your car. The amount of money you get for your trade-in versus your percentage rate, the dealership is still gonna make the same amount of money. So you can say that you got a great deal on your trade-in, or you can get a great interest rate, but you're not gonna get both. So yes, I could continue to try and negotiate this back rent at the expense of our future rent. So we're put between a rock and a hard place when we have an obligation under the written lease for $226,000. So will they waive it? Probably, but certainly there's gonna be more, rent going forward. So the fact that we're sort of getting lost in the weeds of who knew what when and who talked about the other thing, the fact of the matter is the city has an obligation for this $226,000. I could go back and try to negotiate it, but that will put me in a position of not being able to negotiate our rent going forward, whether short-term or long-term. The fact is, the money started coming due in October of 2022. Nobody prior to October of 2022 executed an extension, and no extension was signed in 2023 for whatever reason. So the money is due, and going forward, we'll negotiate a lease here, and then moving on to our new city hall in the future, whether it's here or someone else, we'll be able to negotiate without the distractions of holdover rent, what the city's gonna be in the future. And I will hand it over to the mayor, because I know she's eager to say.
We can go back and forth, Council President, what I will tell you. After I made it very, very clear that I did not support a long-term lease, did I know at that time that our rent was not being paid at that amount? Absolutely not. And coming in January, did I anticipate a $226,000 bill? No way. The second week, the property owner entered my office and said, we want our money. To this very second, he has made it clear they want the $226K. And did I know that it was $226K? No. And in April, when the property owner made it clear long-term lease or move on, we made it clear, Council President, nothing ever came before the council for a long-term lease, the full council, never ever. Did we know? I did not know. Maybe you did. I did not know that escalated rent was not being paid, or in December at the end of the year, pay that rent in December. How would we have known if in December the 226 wasn't paid? So when I came in, was I surprised? Absolutely. So we can go back and forth, that's fine. This is not why we're here. They want their money, they want it now. Me, as mayor, I am proposing with my administration for the council to act on. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from those members? Hearing none, I would entertain, the vote. Councilmember Keel. The ordinance 11.
Yes.
Brosnan,
Aye.
Member McLaren. Aye. Councilmember Vera.
No, I'd like to see some additional negotiations.
Councilmember Sawyer. Aye. Councilmember Casey.
Yes.
And I'm no as well. We are not up to date on negotiations. We don't have any anything in writing to bring us up to date, to let us know. The council should know. And I'm not in favor of, well, that was exactly, excuse me.
Oh.
I am speaking, I'm in the middle of a vote. Thank you.
I thought you were asking me a question.
I
Sorry.
certainly was not.
I just didn't know if you realized the mayor's office does negotiate.
I am aware of that, and that's exactly the argument for why this fee was waived and would continue to be waived during negotiations. Negotiations never ended. They have been continuing, and that is why this fee remains outstanding and would have been waived had we gone with a long-term lease. I'm in the middle of a vote. There is no more discussion. I'm explaining my vote, and so the bottom line is, we're paying this money because the mayor wants a short-term lease for the city hall, so that she can, and all of this, I have to say, before we've done an RFP, while we have outstanding a Lansingburg firehouse, Knickerbocker pool, water treatment plant upgrades, the transmission lines from the reservoir, there are many, many competing projects.
Neglected project.
Exactly. Yeah, sure. Sure. So, entertaining a new city hall, is not necessarily a number one priority. Um, Until negotiations are completed, and we've heard from First Columbia, I can't in good conscience vote to pay. The resolution is adopted. 5-2, and we will entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion. Member Soriento,
Second.
Councilmember Brosnan, second. In favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Want to ask a question again? Okay. Go ahead. That's what it's for. What is it?
Good evening and welcome to the special meeting of the District Council. It's March 27th, and it is about 6:28. Please rise and join the.
please call the roll.
Councilmember Keel. Councilmember Brosnan,
Here.
Councilmember Fay McLaren. Councilmember Vera,
Present.
Councilmember Soriento,
Here.
Councilmember Casey.
Here.
Council President Steele,
Present.
all are present.
Thank you.
We have one item on the agenda this evening, it is an ordinance. Please read that.
Ordinance 11, ordinance transferring funds within the 2023 general fund. Council President Steele at the request of the administration.
Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak for or against this proposal?
My name is Farah Bianco. I live at 6th and 104th, and I'm here to speak in support of this ordinance. And I'd just like to say, I think it's absolutely important that the city council isn't listening to an attorney who in private practice did negotiations for a living and is very, very good at it. So if this attorney is telling the city council that we need to do something about this holdover rent, then we need to do something. As a resident, I'm gonna listen to the expert. Why are we not listening to the expert? It doesn't make any sense. If there's somebody telling us that legally the city is required to pay something, why are we just saying, oh, wait, there was conversations that this didn't happen? It doesn't matter. It does not matter what happened however many years ago. What's happening is right now, a experienced professional is telling us that we need to pay this rent. So if the city council is choosing to ignore an attorney whose job is to do this, then I don't know why the citizens of Troy are gonna trust me. That's just me. I support the ordinance 100%.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to address? Thank you.
Sure, I will. John Kane, generally when experts come and make arguments, they make convincing arguments. I don't feel that this expert, who I'm sure is an expert, made a very convincing argument. Apparently the deputy mayor gave you guys some documents right before the meeting. That's not supposed to happen. It should have been 24 hours. As a member of the public, I didn't get to see it. But if in fact First Columbia said froth out the rent and just continue paying without the holdover amount while we are negotiating, unless those negotiations have ended in writing, you should not have to pay that rent. I'm not saying that the amount is not going to be due, but why is city council being called to a special meeting to pay a bill that could be paid this week or next week? In accounting, you know, years get corrected in the past all the time. That is your job, right? That is what you came to do, presumably. Yes, you are nodding. The comptroller is nodding. This meeting is wholly unnecessary. And the deputy mayor's emotional outbursts, which really do need to stop, aside, you know, I don't feel like the administration made a very good case that this meeting even needed to happen. So, thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to address the council? Seeing none, I would declare the public forum closed. And we'll move on to the ordinance. Do I have a motion on ordinance 11?
Motion.
Councilmember Soriento, is there a second?
Second.
Councilman Brosnan. Discussion on the ordinance.
Council President,
Councilmember Vera.
what happens to funds in the 23 budget when they are not spent? What is the standard operating procedure for that? I guess to go into a little bit more detail, presumably these are not the only accounts that have unspent monies in.
Correct, and usually what you do is that you use unspent funds to accommodate anything that had gone into the red. At this point, I was trying to do an analysis as fast as I could to figure out the money that we could use for 2023. And these are the accounts that I came to, that I believe that would be the easiest to get the money out into the rental fund. And moving forward would be still, we've depleted those accounts with this transfer, but again, there's still gonna be money, that's gonna be used for budgeting and balancing the budget for 2020.
So these monies will be available until when?
I'm confused on your
Does
question.
does the money go away? The unspent money in 23, does it go away?
It gets used to balance the rest of the lines of the budget.
Not for now, yeah, until I can think of a way to rephrase.
Okay, so Councilmember Brazil.
I believe what he's trying to say, you use the money to make whole the accounts that are in fact negative. So if there is an account that isn't a positive number, you would use the money you have to balance the budget, just like anyone else. would. That makes sense. Is that kind of what you're getting after? Yeah.
Yeah, but presumably there is money that will be remain unspent in the 23 budget. Just
I'm hoping, yes.
forever, and does
I
that
just
get rolled
started a
in,
month
does
and a
that
half
get rolled
ago.
into a line item on the 20 budget?
It gets rolled back into, again, it's something that you would have to see how much money is left over and what that money would go to in the future, and which, you know, it would go back into bank accounts that we have. If there's anything left over. Usually you're using the money to balance everything. Usually there's not much left over to deposit back into accounts.
And so then there is a deadline approaching for budget transfers in the 23 fiscal year.
This is literally the last one. We cannot spend any more money in 2023.
But the unused funds in the 23 budget would roll over into the 24 budget.
If there's anything left over after I balance the books. I have to balance the budget, so that right now, we cannot spend anything moving forward for 2023. We weren't supposed to after March 15th. This meeting is being held special to account for this $200,000 that I found out about 2 weeks ago that we needed to pay, and was told and asked to find the money in 2023. So we didn't have to use any of our budgeted money for 2024 to pay for an expense in 2023, which makes sense for accounting purposes. We are gonna move forward, and I'm gonna close the books this Friday. No money is gonna be spent from 2023 after the Friday, and then I'm gonna start balancing the budget. Accounting for, and there's gonna be transfers for 2023 moving forward, but that's just to accommodate any account that's.
Question?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, any other Council President, Councilman McLaren?
So is it possible that after this money is encumbered to pay this holdover rent, and then you go on to balance the budget, that there's going to be a shortfall?
I do not believe that is the case. There are lines that were for revenue that were under report or under budgeted last year specifically for this amount, I guess. I could not find that amount in the short time that I had to look for it. So that money might be there that I can transfer to cover this 200,000, but I haven't dug into that too far yet because I'm still trying to get my, boots into what happened last year and trying to figure out. There's a lot of stuff that's going on in 2023 that I'm still booking right now. That wasn't actually entered for 2023.
Understood, but so I guess my question is, if you haven't been through every line item of the budget, are we sure that this money is actually, is it certain that this isn't gonna cause a shortfall?
When we did the bond issuance in January, we were asked to confirm the books for 2023. When we asked the former comptroller if the $225,000 had been reserved in the 2023 budget, he spoke of under budgeted revenues that would offset the $225,000. What Dylan's saying is that he couldn't confirm that recently, so he pulled the funds from other accounts. But there is a high likelihood that at least $200,000 shortfall in the revenue may still be available to cover any other accounts that may not have been budgeted correctly.
Thank you. Any other questions? Then, I would entertain a vote to move forward. Do you want a slow roll or? Anyone requesting slow roll? No? All in favor?
I,
Opposed? Yes. You're opposed, yes. Okay. 4-3. At this point, we have the public forum on any item on the agenda or any item not necessarily on the agenda. Is there anyone who wishes to speak at this time? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Councilmember Soriento, second. Councilmember Vera.
Council President, before we adjourn, I just want to say, Lindsay, you did a great job filling in.
For adjourning.
I.
Opposed. We are adjourned. Thank you.
I was like, please don't step on it. I didn't want someone to like, deal with it or something. Thank you, I really appreciate it.